We here.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
you guys will be the only ones who know how to counter an offer. All right, so today we're going to talk about modifications, counter offers, addendums. Oh, those of you at home, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Ella.
Thank you. So I don't monitor the chat box when I'm in class because I use screen share a lot of the time. So the documents that we're going to look at today can be found in the Zip Forms library. If you don't know how to access the Zip Forms library, Manny has some catch-up work to do.
That part.
Yeah. So part of the homework for this class is that you should have downloaded and looked at a counter offer, a multiple counter offer, an amendment, and an addendum. That's okay if you haven't. We'll go over those today in class. And I guess those of you who have been in the mentorship program for a while wouldn't know that because the office still hasn't rolled out the official version of my updated training program. But for anyone who wants a copy of that, please email me and I'll send it directly to you. All right. So there are ways to change terms using other documents within our transactions, okay? Once you write an offer or a listing agreement, you cannot modify that document once it's been signed. Okay? You can only modify that document using a different document, a subsequent document. Okay, so we're going to talk about those documents now. I'm going to pull them up and I'm going to use screen share. All right. So I'm going to start with a modification. Oh. All right, a modification is for a listing. So once you have a signed listing agreement with the client, you can't change that listing agreement except by using a modification of listing. Okay, it's also for the buyer representation agreement. That's an agreement between yourself and a buyer for exclusive representation, which we'll cover in buyer consultation class. Okay, or other agreement between principal and broker. What does principal refer to? Any ideas? It's going to be your buyer, seller, landlord, or tenant. Okay, a principal to whatever transaction you're working with, or a principal client relationship. You can see the acronym here, MT. All right, and then you're going to specify what document this is modifying. So if you've taken listing agreement class with me, you know that I like to take a listing agreement active as of the day my client signs it. Though I am not ready to actually put that listing on the MLS, and there is a rule that listings have to go on the MLS within 2 business days of having them execute or having the listing period start. So I make my listing a pocket listing using something called an SELM, seller instruction to exclude from the multiple listing service. And when I know I'm ready to put it on the MLS, I almost always use a modification of listing. I use this document and I modify that listing agreement. And under other terms, I have 2 items. One is to modify the listing date to start as of the day I intend to put it on the MLS. And the second one is to delete the SELM in its entirety. That property is to be marketed publicly on the MLS. Okay, so I almost always use this document every time I take a listing. So the buyer representation agreement has changed pretty drastically as of recent. It used to contractually bind a buyer to working with you, and in the event that they bought with someone else, they were on the hook legally for paying you commission anyhow. I was not a huge fan of using this document, but I also am blessed to be at a place in my career where I don't work with people that I don't trust, generally speaking. usually have some built-in loyalty. My business is by referral. But when I was younger and I needed money badly, I definitely worked with people who probably weren't always loyal to me. But I come from the school of thought that if a buyer doesn't want to work with me and doesn't see my value, I don't really want to work with them either. And I want them to be able to work with someone else. But this new buyer representation agreement, it gives a buyer a unilateral right of cancellation, I think, by giving you written instruction. So if you are modifying that buyer representation agreement, you'd use this document. And like I said, we'll go over that in buyer consultation class, which is probably coming up pretty soon. Okay. Or other. You can modify any agreement between principal and broker. So if I had a lease listing agreement, could I use this document to modify the terms? Yeah. Yeah. This can modify any agreement between principal and broker. Myself being representative of the broker. And it has this line for here dated. So if you've taken listing contract or purchase contract with me, you know that in the top left-hand corner of those contracts is a date. That is the date prepared. It's a legal reference date. And I've explained it to you that if you change anything within that agreement subsequently at any later date, you will reference that date. So I am changing my listing agreement that we signed on, let's say, February 1st. Not signed, but I wrote on February 1st. My clients may have signed it on February 1st. They may have signed it later. Okay, it doesn't matter because that's just a legal reference date. That's the date I wrote the listing contract. So if I'm modifying that listing contract, I would check this box here, the listing agreement. Oh, it's not up here. When did that happen? Just happened. Okay. Let me get back to that. Hold on, guys. All right. Everybody at home can still see?
Yes.
Okay. So I was talking about the reference date being listed here. And then you're going to list Keller Williams Beverly Hills here and the principal name, the client name. Okay, so this document wouldn't be used to modify something that a buyer and seller are involved. It's an agreement just between your client and you. Does that make sense? Okay.
So the date is the original date of the document to.
Yeah, the whatever contract that you're modifying using this document, that contract will always have a date prepared line up at the top left-hand corner.
So it's not to date, the original.
It's the date that you filled out that document, you as the agent.
Okay.
Yeah. Not signed it, just filled it out. The date you prepared.
original
It's
one.
date prepared, yes. Yeah. Okay, and so you're going to list the property it's referencing. You may not have a property it's referencing because you may be using this document to modify a buyer representation agreement. A buyer doesn't necessarily have any property associated with them yet, right? If you are reducing a list price, we have a section for that. If you are extending the expiration of the listing period of your lease listing or your residential listing, you'd use this line. And then, like I said, this other line is for anything else that you need to change. And I always tell you, be very careful with these free-form fields, but this free-form field on this document is very, very commonly used, okay? I just want you to know that if you're going to use your own language, that I want you to be careful with it. I want you to have someone who really knows what they're doing with contract, check it, because even if it makes sense to you, it may affect something that needs to be included in this language, okay? And when we have ambiguous terms in our contracts, we get ourselves in a lot of trouble because there is no right answer.
So if I just working with this buyer without any particular premises, so just empty, no Barton Way, West Hollywood, like nothing, empty.
It depends on what you're modifying. This is, you can modify a lot of things with this. So the best way for you to figure that out is if you were looking at your buyer representation agreement and you wanted to change something in there, right? Then you would know, does that affect a property address or not? There would be no property address if it's not anything associated with the property.
If I just want him to work with me only.
That's a buyer representation agreement. This document could be used to modify a term within your buyer representation agreement, but this is not the document you use to secure that
Thank you, I
representation.
was late for the few minutes. I
Yeah.
got the difference, okay.
All right, so any more questions about this document? No? All right. We are going to now look at where's my addendum?
So there is no place to write the date of, oh, where you sign, you write the date of today, right? In the document.
Huh?
The date of today, the day you
Yeah.
modify, you write it just in the bottom, right? Because
Yeah,
when
the
you
date
talk-
it's signed.
Oh.
Yeah. Give me a second. I guess I didn't download addendum. So if you guys are having trouble following along, these documents are heavily related to contract. Right, so if you're not familiar with contract, it's gonna be hard to follow along in these classes. So if you haven't taken those, all of my classes are online on YouTube. You'll wanna go back and catch up if you can. We do go through these classes in a 10-week cycle, so it will come back, but if you need to catch up, use YouTube. Put it here. Perfect. Okay, so. Where did it go? I downloaded it, right? You guys saw me. Please. Desktop. What is going on with my computer? All right. So the next two documents I want to talk about kind of at the same time. And the name of these documents is super important, all right? These two documents would be used in either a contract situation that's agreed upon or with a listing or pretty much anything else. But the titles of them are very important. Amendment and addendum, all right? We used to just have addendums. But once something is agreed to, when something is signed, just like we saw that modification of listing, the word modify, right? Amend means to modify, amend means to change. Addendum means to add. So you would use an addendum to add terms to a contract that you intend to execute, okay? Or to add a term that is not covered in the contract whatsoever. But if you're going to change something that has been signed, or you're going to address a term in the contract that hadn't been defined previously in that agreed upon contract, then you are going to use an amendment. Okay. So if we are going to agree to a credit in an escrow, okay, the seller is going to credit the buyer $10,000. What document as an agent am I going to draft?
Addendum.
Nope. You only have two choices. What's the other one?
Amendment.
Why?
Because you're changing the original.
Because I'm
terms.
changing terms. Yes, I have an agreed upon contract. Yeah. What about if I'm writing an offer and the buyer wants some stuff included, some personal items included with the sale, and I don't have enough space in inclusions and exclusions portion of the residential purchase agreement? What document?
Addendum.
Yes, yes. You can use addendums to many things, all right? You can use it to a lease agreement, a purchase agreement, transfer disclosure statement, seller property questionnaire. Those are important seller disclosures. We will go over disclosure clause again very soon in our training program. Those are very common because there are lengthy explanations that oftentimes have to be given by your clients. However, I don't always love this addendum doc because it is not necessarily enough space or room. So when I have to use an addendum to a seller's disclosure, I oftentimes will use a lined piece of paper or have them type a Word document, but I will copy this language here. Because as long as I have this language here and I'm identifying date, I'm legally referencing what it's added to, it is still an addendum. It does not have to be this form to be an addendum. Yes.
How is addendum, which is add to,
Mhm.
and amendment is change, and how does that correlate to modify?
So modification is for a single party agreement between broker and seller, or broker and landlord, broker and buyer, broker and tenant. So I'm modifying before I'm in a transaction. Amendment is when I'm in a transaction. We have more than one principal. It's not just between me and my client. It is now between me and all the parties. Yeah. All right, let's see. So I think we have the gist here of addendum, right? And again, it's really important that you make sure you're identifying the correct document that you're adding to or amending by making sure that the way that this document is written, it's either adding to the purchase contract, you're clicking one of these boxes, or you're saying other and you're writing what that document is here and the legal reference date of that document, okay? We can amend and add to inspection requests as well. Okay, so we can use these documents to add or to amend any document within our real estate transaction. Let's say your seller forgets to disclose, something that they did to the house after they signed the transfer disclosure statement. Would we be amending or adding?
Adding.
We would be amending because they've signed it and sent it. Once,
Oh, it was sent. Okay, sorry.
even if it's not sent, once it's signed, it's going to be an amendment.
Okay,
When anyone has signed anything. Yeah.
sorry.
No, you don't need to be sorry. It was a tricky one and I asked it on purpose, so we could discuss. And at the end of the day, most agents, because we only had addendum for so long, don't even know the difference between amendment and addendum. I don't think anyone's gonna kick it back to you. Okay? But I want you to know the difference because I don't want you to get it kicked back to you. Because if you have someone who's technical like me on the other side who needs to wiggle out of something or find an argument to buy some time, I'm going to. I don't know if that argument holds any weight, but it could. It at least solve stuff while I argue with broker to broker, right? So I want you to know the difference. All right, let's talk about there are specialty amendments. Okay, there are a lot of specialty amendments. So when you go into the Zip Forms library, if you type in the words addendum, amendment, you will see like a backup offer addendum. Okay, so we have our addendum form that we could add to a buyer's offer, free form writing saying that we're writing this buyer offer for a backup. But why should we recreate the wheel? We should not. You should never do that. If you can use something that pre-exists, or even like maybe I'll do this oftentimes. I don't like the language or something, but I'll steal it and I'll modify it and I'll put that in my free form addendum. I don't recreate the wheel. Our documents are pretty well written, right? So always go to zip forms when you need to do something in a transaction and see if there's already a form for that. Type in the keywords, play around with it for a little while. Ask someone like myself, Michael Rosales, or Brian Chung, our transaction coordinator, right? We're people who are kind of nerdy about the documents and we enjoy that kind of stuff. I get excited. There's like a way to take your offer away, rescind your offer. And so like, you know, I'll have a shady listing agent who's like, oh yeah, write it, I'll get it accepted. And they're really just shopping my offer. I was super excited. I was like, how do I do that? There was actually a document for that, right? And I didn't know that. Just look around on zip forms and ask around. There's almost always a document for it. So we're not going to go over every single type of addendum, right? But I want you to know that there are a lot. So before you go ahead and use a free form addendum, search around in zip forms and see if there's one that already exists. So really common one is extension of time amendment. Okay. So we have a lot of time frames in our contracts, right? We have contingency deadlines. We have close of escrow date, right? We have contingencies for seller to deliver items to buyer. Well, if anyone needs more time, there's 3 things that can happen. One, that person, the party, usually the buyer, not always though, usually the buyer needs more time for something. They want an extension on a contingency, like let's say maybe the physical, or maybe their lender needs a couple more days for formal loan approval. They're having trouble, you know, they have trouble getting an appraiser out. I don't know. Or let's say the seller is unable to deliver HOA docs on time because HOA management company is shitty and they always are. 3 things that can happen. One, that person who needs that extension can ask the other side, hey, can I have an extension of time? And they can do a formal one and use this extension of time amendment. Or they can do, I often do this when I'm a listing agent. I do a gentleman's extension. I say, well, that sounds pretty valid. I'm not going to give you a formal extension, but we have no intention of serving you notice of form unless we feel like you're not actually taking this seriously and moving it along. Why would I do that, you think? It gives me the ability to serve a notice of reform instead of giving them an agreed upon length of time if I catch wind of the fact that they are really just screwing around. Yeah. So I like to do gentlemen's, you know, and as a listing agent, I have a lot of power to do that because the buyer needs and wants that time, and they're going to take it as a gentleman's agreement if I'm not offering it as a formal agreement, right? If I'm on the other side, however, and I'm the buyer's agent, I really want that formal extension of time amendment so that the seller does not have the right to serve my buyer a notice of form. Did you have a question?
Yeah, when you do the gentleman's agreement, and let's say, for example, the buyer's agent said, hey, no, I actually want an extension of time amendment, do you then agree to it?
It depends on the situation. Like if I feel like they're being honest and straightforward, if my sellers want to move forward with these buyers, you know, a lot of times this is in relation to inspections where, you know, like if the buyers come in and have 12 inspections, I'm like, oh, you just wanted credit. You know, like there's no reason you need more time on this. You just want to credit, you're playing a game, and no. So it really depends. It's up to my seller ultimately. My seller generally takes my advice, but remember, it's not up to us. It's always up to our client what they want to do. So I'll get the seller involved in my strategy and tell them why I feel a certain way about what's going on. But I am under no obligation to give anyone a formal extension. Yeah. You know, I will give someone a formal extension if I feel like it's completely legit. But if I feel like it's completely legit, like it's, you know, I don't need to necessarily give them a formal extension if that makes any sense. just reserves the right for the seller to issue a notice of reform. All right, let's take a look at this. So it's a proposal to amend the terms and conditions of the purchase agreement or whatever other document you have. So let's say you amended a contingency timeframe on something. So you have an RPA, and then you have this document, an amendment of existing agreement terms. And let's say I represent the buyer and the seller wouldn't give us access for inspections. You know, they had some family friends over or something. Well, contractually, they're obligated to give me access anytime I want for the contingency period. So I would say, okay, no problem, listing agent. I just need an extension for the buyer's investigation contingency for the same amount of days you're blocking the access. Okay, but then let's say, you know, I go through those inspections and I'm having trouble getting a secondary inspection I need. And I need to extend that contingency timeframe for the investigation contingency. On this extension of time amendment, would I be modifying the RPA? No, I'd be modifying that amendment because I'm modifying something I've already modified. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So always think about it that way. What am I modifying? Is there a change? So as a new agent, until it interferes with your business activities, like your lead generation activities, I strongly encourage you to do your own transaction management work. Right? You really need to remember the ins and outs of these things. And I know it's really old school, but I actually keep, in addition to electronic copies of my documents, I keep printed copies of my contract documents, my escrow documents, and my title documents. I don't keep all of the disclosures and all of that, but anything contract related, because you know how annoying it is for me to I do use a transaction coordinator. It's really annoying for me to, if I have to issue something immediately, like after hours, I don't have access to the zip forms file my transaction coordinator is using. So I don't know if it's counter offer 5, amendment number 6. I don't know unless I keep that printed copy, since I have someone else. And when I had my assistant, I had other people issuing stuff in relation to my contract. So I wanted every single subsequent contract modification document printed, and it goes in order for me from original to newest modification, right? So anything new goes on top. So it's very easy for me to trace my stuff back, and I can see what it is I need to modify. Because let me tell you, sometimes you will see these documents written wrong to amend the wrong thing. And it can cause massive contract problems. Massive contract problems. If you are amending the wrong item, you may very well put your client in a bad position. All right, now that I've scared you, I'm sorry. Again, just remember that free-form documents should be looked over by someone who really knows contracts. When you change something, okay? When you change something, the other party has to agree to it. It doesn't just change because you wrote it up and your client signed it. No, the other party has to sign it. All right, and I don't actually like this, but now there's an expiration, which is super annoying. So if you've got another agent on the other side who's really lackadaisical about getting paperwork signed, and they don't have their client signed before this expiration, which happens to be the same as like our contract, 3 days following at 5 p.m. following the last signature of the party initiating the change. So I actually changed this expiration to be like 7 days, just in case, you know, like I'm not a lackadaisical agent, but I use a transaction coordinator, and there are times, doesn't matter who I'm using, that I'm like, hey, has this been signed? And they're like, oops, no, sorry. People get busy, things happen, so build some breathing room in there so that you don't have to redo this stupid document. Okay, an amendment not accepted. Well, you're a better agent than that, because you should never be writing an amendment and sending it out if you haven't verbally negotiated that with the other agent. What are you doing? You think you just write stuff up and send it over expecting people to sign it? It's funny, I had a transaction and it was a problematic transaction, and the other agent was using the same transaction coordinator as me. She was like, stop telling my transaction coordinator to get stuff signed. It took me like 40 emails. I was like, bitch, we use the same transaction coordinator. I don't think you understand it. I'm not telling you to have your client sign anything. I use the same person as you. I'm telling you to have my client sign this. Finally, she was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, yes, you've been nasty and sent me like 40 emails, like email stalking me over not understanding. I'm not sure how I could have made it clearer. This would not be an issue if you're using different transaction coordinators, but I'm not telling him to have your client sign. If he's doing that, you need to talk to your, like him providing services to you, remembering to check with you instead of forgetting that, you know, he has two different parties he's representing. Let's see here. All right, let's talk about counter offers. All right, so there's singular counter offers and there are multiple counter offers. Okay. In order for a seller to issue a multiple counter offer, what's the criteria? Yeah, you need multiple offers. You need more than one offer. And not only that, the offers have to be valid. They cannot be expired. Yeah, so watch those expiration dates because a lot of times if I have multiple offers, I don't care when they expire. It's going to take me some time to get through them, especially if I have a lot. And so unless there's an outstanding offer that my sellers are really just wanting to take, and I've pre-negotiated that with one of the buyer's agents, I'm going to respond to them when I want to respond to them. But if I have 3 of them and 2 of them are expired by the time I'm ready to counter, can I issue a seller multiple counter offer? No, I cannot. So at that point, I need to call the buyer's agents and I need to say, hey, buyer's agent, send me an addendum signed, extending your expiration, please. Or I can send them an amendment extending their expiration, right? They can add to something that's just theirs. I cannot add to theirs because it's their offer. I can only respond to it on counter offer or amendment. I really shouldn't be doing anything as a listing agent on multiples, plus I can barely keep track of what I'm doing at that point. So I'm just calling that buyer's agent. I'm just saying, hey, I need you to send me over an addendum extending your buyer's offer expiration. Okay, so watch that because technically that's not legal. This is probably one of the biggest instances of fraud that occurs in our industry. Okay, and I know it because people come into my contract class, we talk about this all the time. They're like, yeah, but your client wants you to, so you do. No, you do not. This is lose your license offense. It is absolute fraud, right? Because you are making the buyer think that they have competition that they do not have in order to what? Probably get their price up, get their terms more amenable to the seller's wants. Okay, that's just not okay. I hate this. It happens all the time. If you feel like this is happening, you know, there's not much you can do about it. It's really funny, like I'll write an offer on something that's been sitting on the market for 4 months. And then the listing agent will say something to me like, oh yeah, well, we just got another offer. And I'm like, I go to my clients and I'm like, so the listing agent says they have another offer. I strongly doubt that because it's been on the market for 4 months and it's not like they just made a price reduction or anything. But we'll receive a multiple counter offer. I just want you to know that I don't actually think that there are multiples, but I have no way of knowing. Just giving you my professional opinion.
Wow. Can you check it?
No,
Oh my God.
because I don't have the right to access someone else's offer terms. Those are confidential because they are allowed the ability, in the case that they actually had multiple offers, to play us off of one another.
Yeah, I had an experience when we went back and forth with all these offers, counter offers, and when we get multiple counter offer, the listing agent was asking like 3rd time, give us the best and final price. But it wasn't like step forward. For example, we're doing like 1 million, and he's countering 1,100,000, like 1.1 or something. He was pushing best and final price, and my buyer was like, what the games, what kind of game it is?
I do best and final. Look, I generally think when you have multiple offers, that's it. You might have 2 rounds. After that, people feel like they're being played.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case, and you don't know the specifics. You really don't.
Any rule that with multiple counter offers?
We can talk about this more after, but I might be explaining what you're about to ask.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so when I receive multiple counter offers, I generally give all of my offers, unless they're just absolutely ridiculous, and I have tons of them anyways, a response. If I don't give them a response, I need to let them know. There's actually a space at the bottom of a purchase agreement for my sellers to sign saying that I have presented the offer and that my sellers have rejected it. Okay. Do people always want or ask for that? No, but in the case someone thought I was lying, I could maybe do that to make them feel better, right? But I generally don't think people think I'm lying. I'm not, because I don't do that. Because this is one of the base ethical things that we work with, right? This is not something that should be violated. So can I have seller multiple counter offer number 1? Yes. Can I have 2? Yeah. Can I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? To infinity? Absolutely. But buyers start to get wary when there's more than a couple of rounds of multiple counter offers. And when I issue a multiple counter offer, there's 2 ways to do it. You can issue blanket terms, like these are the terms that the seller wants. Or you can, though there are multiple counter offers, you issue an individual one to each buyer, which is a professional way to do it because you're not overplaying your cards, right? One of the buyers may have offered me a fantastic term on one of the contingencies, yet I can't counter everyone back in a blanket counter offer where everyone gets the same terms, that number, because that might scare some people away that have otherwise great terms or can come up in price or whatever. So I always issue individual counter offers, and it's a lot more work and it takes a lot more time, but that's really the professional way to do it without showing your seller's cards to all the buyers. Okay. So when a buyer responds to a seller multiple counter offer, can I not download this item? Yeah. Okay, so when a buyer responds to a seller multiple counter offer, it's always going to be buyer counter offer, and it can be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The seller is issuing a singular counter offer to one buyer offer. It's going to be seller counter offer. You see this may not be used as a seller multiple counter offer. Okay. So when you issue a counter offer, whether it's multiple or a singular, you only need to identify the terms you want to change. So if a seller is countering a buyer counter offer and there are 5 items on there and the seller agrees to 1, 2, and 3, they just don't agree to 4 and 5. The only thing I need to draft on other terms are in relation to 4 and 5. Okay, you do not need to reiterate things that haven't been addressed. Okay, we are only moving forward, modifying things that were not agreed upon yet. You can also incorporate addendums, backup offer addendums, amendments, sorry, not an amendment. RLAS, we talked about RLAS and SIP, right? Maybe in the counter offer process, it's discovered that a seller wants a lease back. So now the buyer might counter back with, or the seller might counter back with the SIP attached or the RLAS attached because there's a document associated with a lease back, right? Buyer doesn't know, buyer's agent was lazy and didn't find out from the listing agent that seller needed a lease back. So seller loves the buyer's offer and now they're using the seller counter offer to counter back that they want a lease back, but they can't just say they want a lease back because we need to what? We need to identify the terms of what that lease back entails. So if it is over 29 days, it's going to be an RLAS form, which is here, residential lease after sale, and under 30 days, up to 29, SIP form, right? So there can be documents that we need in association with terms that we are countering. And they would be attached to your counter offer. So you can have an RPA with addendums. You can have a multiple counter offer with addendums or other documents associated with it. You can have counter offers to the documents attached to that, or a counter offer to the counter offer that has those documents attached to that, right? It becomes very complicated. What I recommend in these situations, get on the fucking phone with the other agent and hash it out. Write the document so it doesn't get that confusing. Make sure you just negotiate. If you're writing a lease back term, talk to the other agent. Make sure their client's okay with it. Make sure they're gonna sign it so it doesn't get that confusing. There is no point to draft these documents over and over and over again. It all leads to the general sense of frustration. It is less likely that you're gonna have positive outcome and as positive and productive of a transaction. Get it right. Make friends, make everyone happy as you go into your inspection negotiations. You need goodwill, right? Work together. And don't make it so confusing that no one can figure out what's going on by not talking. All right. I think we've talked about pretty much everything within the multiple counter offer world. All of them have expirations, okay? They all have an acceptance spot, except for seller multiple counter offer. Why? Why does a seller multiple counter offer not have a full acceptance spot?
Because there is still more candidates that compete for the same offer.
Yeah, several buyers can accept the seller multiple counter offer. There is a subsequent selection of accepted multiple counter offer down here in section 8. Right, so if I issue 5 counter offers, 3 of the buyers accept. Seller still has to decide which one they're moving forward with. However, I don't do that. I make that impossible if I'm issuing a seller multiple counter offer on purpose. That way I can just get their counter terms and accept one. How do I do that? I put an intangible term into my seller counter offer. Even if my seller wants a number, let's say they want me to counter back at $1 million. I would say $1 million or higher. No one can accept that offer. They can only counter, or sorry, that counter. They can only counter it because I have not stipulated the price. I have left an intangible there on purpose so that the buyers have to come back, but also so that the buyers have a sense of, oh, I may want to bid higher than this, right? So my seller is saying, I'm accepting a minimum of 1 million or higher. Go ahead, buyers, give it your best shot.
This sounds way better than give me best and final price. Because-
Sometimes I use best and final too. Sometimes I don't want to play my cards. It's all strategy.
Wow.
So yeah, I purposely don't want to get myself into the situation. Why? Because if the buyers all accept, they're all the same, right? They're all the same term pretty much. I want to give my seller the best price and terms. So I put that intangible in there so that a buyer can come back with best price. Also, it gives me the option at that point to start countering an individual. Right? Because how does a buyer feel when you've given them a seller multiple counter offer, they accept it, and then you counter them back again? Pretty shitty.
Yeah.
But if I keep the situation going because they had to issue me a counter offer, it doesn't psychologically feel that way. I'm not telling them you can have it for this. Oops, just kidding. And making people feel icky. I'm countering them. They have to counter me back. And so if I need to counter them back again, that's an acceptable form of response. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. It's all about how I present the same information. Buyers feel like they're being played, right? Also, if I have buyers drop out, or I love the terms of one buyer's offer in a multiple offer situation, except for one, So I don't want to scare my second best offerer away. So I can individually counter this one buyer after issuing multiples, if they respond to my multiple, to try to get them to come to my term while holding these people at bay and not alerting them to the fact that I'm basically, they're my second choice, right? They're my backup. That way they can believe that they are my choice, or our choice, I should say, instead of backup. It gives me more options strategically and it makes people feel better. Right? Do we have any questions about any of these documents? I can pull them back up. I just need to know if we have questions, guys. No? All right. Well, I will see you again tomorrow. I hope that you have a great day. And remember, look at the
Thank you,
document.
Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.